Republican Senator and Trump sycophant Lindsey Graham was asked about the fact that Donald Trump is making good on his sinister campaign promise to use government power to politically punish those whom he perceives to be political opponents. Rather than take a principled opposition to this, Lindsey Graham actually doubled down and went off on an unhinged rant, getting visibly emotional and saying he supports Donald Trump's ability to go after his political opponents. We have truly crossed the Rubicon. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, you guys remember when Lindsey Graham was supposed to be a principled conservative, a Republican who, yes, opposed Donald Trump, but, eventually Trump won the nomination. And you know what? Lindsey had to give him a second chance. And you know what? He still disagrees with Donald Trump from time to time, and he'll call him out. Well, those increasingly few people who believe that Lindsey Graham has some sort of spine or principles might be surprised to see what I'm about to show you. We're going to play this clip and unpack it together.
There were more executive orders from the president this week targeting some of the country's most prominent law firms, including Paul Weiss. He wants to restrict business activities of the firm, despite a federal judge ruling in a different case that it's unconstitutional. The president suspended security clearances at the firm. He stripped clearances from lawyers over at Covington and Burling as well because they were involved in representing former special counsel Jack Smith. Do you support this?
Yeah, I think all of these things. I think Jack Smith was politically motivated. I think the Russian hoax, a lot of people should have gone to jail and they didn't. I think the idea that President Trump was an agent of Russia was manufactured. The Steele dossier was based on lies and falsehoods coming from a source that said he never meant it to be used in the fashion it was used. I think Jack Smith's effort to prosecute President Trump for January 6th was politically motivated, and people who engage in trying to destroy President Trump, I don't mind him going after them in a lawful way.
So let's just, the clip goes on and we're going to play the rest of it, but let's stop there. So Lindsey Graham's position is people use the power of government to go after Donald Trump in a legal but politicized way. And so he believes Donald Trump, in turn, should be able to go after the people who went after Trump in a legal but politicized way. That's absurd. That's a really absurd thing to propose, right? That Lindsey Graham actually supports the weaponization of the government. And again, as Margaret Brennan points out here, not just targeting Jack Smith, former special counsel appointed by President Biden's Department of Justice to investigate Donald Trump, but actually just investigating, targeting and punishing and revoking the security clearances, which could affect the businesses of law firms that simply worked with Jack Smith. I mean, that would be like that. It would almost be like if I have a disagreement with you, I start picking on your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your husband rather than you. Well, what the hell did you? You're just married to them, right? They worked in a professional capacity with an American citizen who happened to be a government official. It was just business. And there's no evidence of, nor any allegation of, that what these law firms did was illegal. That would be different. Instead, it was like, oh, you did a perfectly legal thing. It just happened to be politically inconvenient for me, and I don't like it. Well, screw you. I'm going to use my position as head of state and head of government to punish you accordingly and potentially destroy your business. And Lindsey Graham is publicly saying, yeah, I've got no problem with that. Imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. Would he be saying something similar about President Biden targeting a law firm that worked with Donald Trump or Republicans or Lindsey Graham? I doubt it, but we'll continue because it gets worse.
I don't mind.
Is this lawful? Is this good for the U.S. legal system, Senator? Because the president's trying to use government power to punish private business because he didn't like some of the work they had been doing.
Private business aided government power in a fashion to destroy Donald Trump's life. On our side, nobody in your world gets it, but our people believe that the Justice Department was used as a weapon to destroy Trump's campaign and his business interests and to ruin his family, that they made up bogus charges and they proceeded in a fashion that was designed to destroy him politically and personally. I believe that. And if these people involved pay a price, they got nobody but themselves to blame.
But these are lawyers working on cases that you're making it sound like the work that they take on is somehow part of a conspiracy and they should be punished for it.
Yeah, I think these law firms were pushing legal theories that, to me, were designed for political outcomes more than legal outcomes. We can have a debate about, holding a lawyer accountable for his client's actions. I generally don't like that. But these law
That's
firms,
what this sounds like.
Jack Smith using the power of government, incorporating these law firms, in my view, were trying to disrupt and take down the Republican nominee for president. That this was an orchestrated effort, and Biden only regretted they didn't do it sooner. So it was politically motivated, and everybody with their fingerprints on it, I hope they pay a price.
There you have it. Okay, so again, Lindsey Graham's position is Donald Trump is perfect, could not potentially break the law, could not, did not, is incapable of providing any sort of legal predicate for an investigation. And if you investigate Donald Trump for any reason, you're politically attacking him. And if you try to hold Donald Trump accountable, or if you try to investigate him for any reason, then that justifies the Republicans using scorched earth weapons, effectively scorched earth tactics against you to destroy your businesses. And listen to, again, some of the unhinged things that Lindsey Graham says. Anyone whose fingerprints are on it, I hope they pay a price. I don't generally support going after your political opponents, but, and then here he makes an exception. But I also want you to know, believe it or not, there are conservatives out there, they're rare, and they still grade Trump on a curve, and it still grows, who actually oppose this, and they include the Wall Street Journal and the National Review. Trump's executive order targeting Perkins Coie must be condemned. That was one of the first law firms that Trump attacked. Every fiber in my being makes me want to ignore the Perkins Coie story. It stems from a March 6th executive order in which Trump condemned and sought to punish the law firm that prominently represented the Democratic Party, the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, and others implicated in the plot to frame Trump as a clandestine agent of Russia. Two top lawyers deeply involved in that scheme are no longer at the firm, which Trump is evidently trying to put out of business. The Seattle-based organization employs 3,700 people, 1,200 lawyers, and the rest support staff, almost none of whom had anything to do with Russiagate. It's nothing less than a bill of attainder, and as that unconstitutional decree has always been understood in America. He goes on to say, and this is by Andy McCarthy, right, Fox News lawyer, that the left doesn't make it easy. He goes, I'd prefer to ignore the EO because Democrats and their base supporters are now expressing outrage over it are hypocrites, he says. It's hypocrites. I don't know how that's the case, but he goes on and on and on ranting about it. I mean, at length. But he makes the case that what it is an unconstitutional bill of attainder. That's it. Trump is stubbornly wrong, however, in refusing to accept that the payback he gets, extraordinary payback, but the only legitimate payback, is his stunning political comeback. The Democrats suffered thunderous defeat in large part because the public saw these and other lawfare abuses as scandalous. That has to be enough. Trump's retribution is that he won the presidency. It's not turning the presidency into lawfare on steroids. And so even Andy McCarthy, again, this conservative attorney, this Fox News legal analyst, he's grading Trump on a curve. He's buying into most of the premises here, which I categorically reject. But even he agrees that what Trump is doing here is taking that quote-unquote lawfare thing and actually taking it and bringing it to steroids, making it considerably worse. Considerably worse. And he makes the case that it must be condemned. I mean, it's one of the most thorough articles I've ever seen. And we're going to get to the conclusion there right there. Judge Howell reportedly suggested the executive order amounts to viewpoint discrimination in violation of the First Amendment, among other things. I believe it's a bill of attainder. However you look at it through the Constitution's prism, it cannot stand. Republicans are evidently too cowed by the president and his base to make a peep out of this. They are currently in control of Congress. They won't be in control of it for long if they can't bring themselves to condemn unabashed abuses of executive power. It's exactly what it is. The Wall Street Journal has also written about this as well, especially with subsequent developments. But there you have it, folks. Donald Trump is using the power of the state to relentlessly target people whom he perceives as political opponents in ways we've simply never seen. You know, again, we've talked about this before. People make claims about the Biden Justice Department, but President Biden's Justice Department investigated President Biden and humiliated him politically, did extraordinary political damage to him. But the investigation was allowed to begin and allowed to conclude, despite being politically inconvenient. President Biden's Justice Department indicted, prosecuted, had successfully convicted Hunter Biden, President Biden's only living son. Biden then used his pardon power to pardon Hunter Biden, but that conviction was allowed to be secured, and that investigation was allowed to take place. Also, very politically inconvenient to President Biden and harmful to his family. President Biden's Justice Department investigated multiple sitting Democrats during an election year. Eric Adams, mayor of New York, Henry Cuellar, Democratic congressman from Texas, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, and others as well. More elected Democrats and more prominent Democrats were targeted by Biden's DOJ than prominent Republicans. Biden's DOJ bent over backwards to avoid prosecuting Trump. There's credible reporting that Merrick Garland dragged his feet about it because he didn't want the Justice Department to be seen as political. And he knew that's exactly what Republicans would say if they brought any sort of case against Donald Trump, because you have to understand, the GOP is largely, not entirely, but largely a cult of personality. Donald Trump is incapable of violating the law as far as people are concerned. And even the few who suggest that he might be capable of it say that it's not good to go after former presidents. I think it's actually healthy in a democracy for any former president, and that includes Democratic former presidents, not just Republicans, to be subject to criminal prosecution. I don't like presidential immunity. I think it's gross. I think it smacks of sovereign immunity, which is something we left behind when we had the revolution against Great Britain. We don't have kings here. Presidents are afforded extraordinary powers and privileges, but this idea that they're given a blank check to effectively commit crime with impunity as long as they do it while they're in office and they can never be held accountable, that's bullshit. It's un-American. It's gross. So when people say, oh, you just don't want Obama or Biden to be prosecuted, if you have a cognizable case against those two men, bring it. I don't care. They're not saying that it's not possible to bring a politicized case against politicians, but we also have protections here. You have to convene a grand jury. You have to bring the evidence. You actually have to get it through all the initial motions in court, to avoid a slap suit or a frivolous suit. There are so many protections given to criminal defendants that I think if you ask me, okay, are those sufficient to protect against a right-wing DOJ or a right-wing prosecutor from going after a former president? Yes, I'm more concerned with presidents being seen as unaccountable and above the law than I am with former presidents having to deal with criminal prosecutions. But I'm consistent. But again, even conservative outlets who buy into so much of Trump's bullshit say that this has gone too far and what he's doing is objectively worse. And that's exactly what's happening. And Lindsey Graham is defending it. And he's getting visibly emotional when he does. So to anyone out there who thought that Lindsey Graham still had a bit of self-respect, a bit of principle, a bit of spine, I think it's gone now. He is openly celebrating and cheering on in vicious fashion Donald Trump's campaign of retribution against Trump's political opponents. And that should be condemned. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.